For years, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was considered one of the most universally loved celebrities in the world. Whether it was wrestling, acting, fitness, or philanthropy, he managed to maintain a reputation as a larger-than-life figure who was both inspirational and harmless. But beneath that image, small cracks had already begun to form long before the public turned on him. And when those cracks were finally exposed, they started spreading faster than anyone expected. But before we get into anything, make sure you drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment your thoughts down below. Every bit of support helps reach more viewers and people just like you. Now, let's get into it. It began with something that should have been harmless. A string of carefully curated social media posts showing his intense workouts, hyper-specific diets, and motivational speeches. For a long time, people loved it, but eventually, the constant positivity started to feel less inspiring and more manufactured, like a scripted performance designed to maintain a brand rather than express anything real. Then there were the movie roles.
It doesn't matter!
For almost a decade, Johnson dominated Hollywood with a formula that rarely changed. Play the unstoppable hero, play it safe, and never lose on screen. At some point, audiences began to notice that Johnson seemed unwilling to take risks, evolve, or portray flawed characters. Everything had to reinforce the idea of invincibility. And while that strategy made him a blockbuster icon, it also made him predictable and eventually untrustworthy. Things escalated when multiple reports surfaced about the behind-the-scenes behavior on certain productions. Rumors of creative control battles, claims that he frequently arrived late to set, stories of entire filming schedules being rearranged around him. None of this destroyed his career, but it helped reshape the narrative. Johnson wasn't just a hard-working everyman. He was a powerful celebrity using his influence to dictate entire projects. Still, public opinion remained mostly positive, until his feud with another major actor publicly boiled over. What started as a behind-the-scenes disagreement quickly turned into a full-blown online conflict, with accusations of unprofessionalism and ego clashing against Johnson's spotless public persona. For the first time, fans were seeing a version of The Rock that didn't align with the endlessly grateful, always optimistic figure they were used to. And once audiences began questioning authenticity, it becomes extremely difficult for a celebrity at his level to regain trust. By the time allegations of unfulfilled promises, clashing egos, and inconsistent personal stories began circulating online, the public was already primed to believe them. What used to be dismissed as harmless became fuel for a growing belief that Dwayne Johnson was more brand than person, someone whose public image was tightly controlled and carefully managed at every step. This escalating scrutiny paved the way for the controversies that would follow, pushing Johnson from the most likable man in Hollywood to one of the most questioned. After the podcast appearance, another issue quietly resurfaced, a moment where Johnson claimed he was trying In-N-Out for the very first time. Fans immediately dug up posts from 2017 showing him saying the exact same thing back then, even calling himself the chain's newest and biggest fan. When this resurfaced, he edited the caption to say he had forgotten he'd eaten there before. To most people, it was a tiny, harmless mistake, but with Johnson's authenticity already under scrutiny, the moment fed into a growing narrative that his public persona was carefully manufactured, and that even offhand comments were part of a polished, controlled image. At the same time, people were questioning how someone in their 50s could maintain such an extreme physique. The broader fitness community openly speculated about steroid use, especially as several high-profile figures had recently been exposed for lying about performance-enhancing drugs. To this day, Johnson insists that the only time he experimented was when he was a teenager. But the skepticism hasn't gone away, mainly because Johnson has built a massive part of his brand on discipline, nutrition, and an almost inhuman work ethic. If he were to ever admit that he'd use anything beyond that, it wouldn't just damage his credibility, it would unravel years of messaging that millions of fans had internalized as truth. That's the corner he's trapped himself in. Admitting it would cause fallout, but denying it only causes and fuels speculation. And then came another major blow to his reputation. In 2023, after devastating wildfires hit Maui, Johnson and Oprah launched a fund asking the public to donate. Their intentions may have been good, but the timing could have not been any worse. With people already struggling financially, seeing two of the wealthiest celebrities on the planet asking the general public for contributions while they provided an amount that many felt was insignificant relative to their wealth, created almost immediate backlash. Residents of Hawaii, who were already dealing with one of the highest costs of living in the country, were especially critical. Many questioned why Johnson and Oprah didn't instead rally support from their wealthy peers. Johnson eventually acknowledged the backlash publicly and said he could have handled the situation better, but the damage to his man of the people image was already done. The distrust only grew with every appearance he made afterward. His interviews began feeling more controlled, more rehearsed, more like PR damage control than open conversation. When he finally appeared on one of the largest podcasts in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience, viewers expected transparency. What they got instead felt like another layer of corporate polish, reinforcing the idea that Johnson was no longer capable of letting the facade drop. He even referenced how during his wrestling days, he had been trained to always present gratitude, always smile, and always push the image the company wanted, even when crowds were chanting against him. The glimpse behind the curtain, unintentionally raised an uncomfortable question: has The Rock ever actually stopped performing? Because by this point, the public was already starting to feel like they weren't seeing Dwayne Johnson as the person, only Dwayne Johnson as the product. After the Maui backlash and increasingly forced public appearances, Johnson's reputation had clearly shifted. What once felt genuine now seemed calculated, and whenever he tried to address criticism, the delivery felt so scripted that it only made things worse. His appearances at events were dissected frame by frame. Fans pointed out how his speeches repeated the same lines over and over again: gratitude, positivity, and discipline, until they sounded less like personal beliefs and more like branding slogans. And with every new attempt to repair his image, viewers noticed how disconnected he seemed from the criticism itself, as if he was more concerned about the optics than the actual issues. This became especially obvious during the promotional tours for his recent films. Instead of addressing the controversies transparently, he often pivoted to motivation, smiling through the conversation even when the topic didn't call for it. The public began to interpret this as avoidance, a refusal to acknowledge anything that threatened the persona he had spent decades building. But perhaps the biggest shift came from the fans themselves. Many started revisiting old interviews, commercials, and posts, noticing patterns that had gone ignored for years. Moments that once felt charming now looked overly polished. Stories that once sounded inspiring began to feel exaggerated, and the relentless, never stop working mentality felt less like motivation and more like performance. It didn't help that Hollywood's landscape was finally changing. Audiences no longer responded to the indestructible blockbuster hero archetype the same way they once did. They wanted vulnerability, creativity, and self-awareness, things Johnson seemed reluctant to show. While other major actors were reinventing themselves, Johnson kept doubling down on the same persona, unaware that the cultural tide had finally shifted. As more people publicly expressed fatigue, a new narrative took hold. Dwayne Johnson wasn't being exposed, he was becoming outdated. Not because he lacked talent, but because he refused to evolve. Not because he did anything unforgivable, but because the world finally stopped buying the performance. And while none of these controversies alone were catastrophic, together they painted a picture of someone struggling to maintain control of a brand that had outgrown him. Someone who had spent so long being The Rock that he had forgotten how to be Dwayne Johnson. The question now isn't whether he can restore his reputation, it's whether he's even willing to let the image crack long enough to try. If you made it this far, thank you. Come and join the tribe, we'd love to have you. If you want to go even deeper into the collapse of modern online personalities, watch my full breakdown on the downfall of Johnny Somali, a story that shows exactly what happens when ego, delusion, and desperation collide on the internet. It ties perfectly into everything we've talked about today, and if you haven't seen it already, you're missing half the picture. It's on the left side. Click on the left side of your screen right now. Make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment about what the downfall or controversy you want me to cover next. Your support generally helps the channel grow, and I appreciate every single one of you. Alright, love y'all.